I suck at painting. Okay, maybe you do too. But I've been painting for the last year, painting miniatures, and I love doing it, and I'm just not good at it. There's got to be something out there, right, that we can do to get better at painting. Ninja? I have been watching YouTube videos for the last year on everything tabletop related, from Warhammer to D&D, from painting miniatures to printing miniatures, and all things in between. Because I love the hobby and I wanted to be better at it. I wanted to get better at it. And so I started thinking about it and trying to come up with ways for me to get better. The point of this channel is to help you get better. And so I thought, well, what can I do to help them and myself along the way?
I'm not being greedy.
And I settled on painting first because it's something that I think is incredible. I see some of the work from people like Ninjon, people like Miniac, Squidmar, Sergio Calvo, people out there that are just incredible artists. And one day, I would like to be as good as they are.
The best there ever was.
So I thought, maybe they can teach me. Ninjon was probably the first channel that I started really watching and just loved his content, loved the way he did things. And I watched most of his videos for the last year and learned nothing.
Then that's my fault.
So I thought, well, maybe I should watch him again with the intent of learning something. And maybe then I would paint a little better. So that's what I set out to do. I wanted to see if watching his content and actually doing what he said would make me a better artist. And I think you'll be interested in what I found. So, how do I determine if I'm getting any better? Well, that was kind of easy. What I did was I printed 2 of the same exact model. This is Teddy. I think his name is actually Little Teddy, which is kind of funny because he's huge. And he's great. He was a good model. I wanted something that was a little bigger than normal, just because I felt like I'd be able to do a better job with a model that's bigger instead of, just your standard miniatures with their tiny, tiny faces.
They have tiny little faces.
And so I wanted something that was a little bit bigger. It's not much bigger. I mean, if you play Warhammer, it's probably the size of a Terminator, something like that. And he'll go great in my spaceship that I have back there. And so I printed 2 of the same exact model. I primed them in black, and then I painted one. This one actually is the one that I painted. And I have close-ups and everything like that for all of the painting along the way. Except for with my painting process on this one. I don't have much of a process. I pick a color, I throw it on, I'm done.
Pretty impressive.
At the end, everything has got its own color, and I'll throw a little bit of a wash on it. This was all fine and dandy for my miniatures, but if I wanted to get better, I had to start doing what others said, and in this case, I followed Ninjon's advice. I went to his channel over the last week and watched probably 15 of his different videos from the last couple years, and did everything I could to come up with his steps for painting. Now, he doesn't have a specific video that I could find that's a breakdown of this is how you paint a miniature. Instead, he kind of lets you figure that out while giving you really good tips. And so I started taking notes. I actually took 2 pages of notes from Ninjon and the stuff that he said to do. And so I started out and I started doing that. I took that model, and per his advice, I started on the inside first. I started painting on the layer that was on the inside, the closest to the skin. If it is the skin, then you do the skin first. And this applies to everything I did except for the head. I did the head last. But I started with his shirt. Then I moved to his pants, to his boots, to the armor that was on his suit. And I painted in that order. One of the other points of advice that he gives is to use your shadows, your lights and things like that, and to focus on what is light. And what I mean by that is, his shoulders, if light was coming down from the top, his shoulders would be exposed to the light. So technically, the shoulders would be a different color from the rest of his shirt. And so I went back in with my red, and I added a little white to it, made it a little lighter, put it on the shoulders. The parts of his arms, the parts of his back that were exposed, I lighted those up. And in all honesty, I was terrified because it was pink on top of red and I hated how it looked. But one of the things that he teaches is that you should contrast more than you're comfortable with. And in the end, it'll work out. And so I did it. It was pink on top of red. I wasn't super happy with it, but I kept going. And I moved on to the pants. And the pants was amazing. As weird as that sounds. I started with the denim blue, and then I added some white to my blue. And I painted in the creases and the folds and the things like that would pop out. The areas where I thought there would be, some wear and tear, I tried to do those a little lighter because they would be worn away. One of the things that Ninjon says is to pay attention to what it is you're painting. If it's fabric, try to stick with a fabric texture. And so when I was doing the highlights, I was using the tip of my brush to try and do little lines that you would put in fabric. And the jeans looked amazing. To me, I thought they were actual jeans. I went from having a cartoon character that I had painted a cartoon character to having a cartoon character wearing real jeans, if that makes any sense. And then I moved on. I moved down to the boots, and I did the same thing with the boots. I tried to add light around the cusp and the rim of the boots, places that would be worn out. I moved on to the armor. This character has metal arms. I'm in no way ready to start trying non-metallic metals. I'm gonna save that for a little later in my painting journey when I feel like I'm a little better prepared for it. But he has multiple videos on non-metallic metal. I just felt like maybe I'll come back to those in the future when I'm a little more confident in my painting skills. One of the things he says, which, to anyone watching these, it's a no-brainer, but you gotta practice. I watch his hands, as weird as that sounds. I watch his hands when he paints, and they're pretty solid. They're not shaky. And after painting for an hour, my hands were shaking like crazy. I had to start putting them down on the table to prop them up so that they wouldn't shake. And that was when I realized that he's right.
You don't say.
It's not enough to just pick up a miniature every now and then and paint. It's muscle memory. It's things like that. You got to do it pretty frequently to get to the point that they're at. But I kept going. I did my skin. I added some reds to it to make it feel like there was blood under the skin, which he says all the time in his videos, and I loved how it turned out. I started this whole thing off trying to follow some of the lessons that he had put forward, and among those were don't use a million colors. So what I did was I used the palette that came with my Warhammer starter set. You could get the $50 pack that came with paints and a small couple of Space Marines and Necrons, but it came with, the 12 paints or whatever it had with it. And I thought, this is something accessible that a lot of people will have. They're normal paints, things like that. And so I used only those colors, and I didn't even use all of them. I just used, 7 or 8 of them. And then of those, I just mixed them together. I mixed them with whites, I mixed the yellows, I mixed the reds. And I was able to come up with a palette of colors that I was happy with this miniature. And I used the same paints on my miniature that I used on the second miniature that I painted after watching the Ninjon. And because of that, I used the silver that came with it, and I was struggling with doing highlights on the silver, and I didn't like how they were looking, but at the end of the day, I had done my best.
Better than most horses.
The brushes that I was using, standard brushes. that come with the set. There's nothing fancy about them. And you start to learn that there are little pieces to all of this that help. Better brushes, a stiffer bristle. My goodness, that's what I kept thinking about all the time, was if I had stiffer bristles on this brush, I could do the fine details so much easier. Eyes, even on a bigger model, they were impossible, but I did my best. You know, and after a few hours, I was done. The last thing that I did, that I've seen on multiple videos, was I hit the whole thing with some wash. With a wash. I went over the whole thing, and it's kind of crazy what happened. Those contrast colors that I had made so bright that I was not happy with, underneath the contrast became perfect. They looked the way that they should. The brights of the jeans now became a dingy, dirty, but worn texture. The pink on the shirt that I hated faded right into the red and became worn shoulders of a red shirt instead of a pink and red shirt. And in the end, I was extremely happy with how it turned out. Now, as I look at this model and look at the work that I put into it, is it a million times better than the one that I originally painted? No. You might be looking at it right now and thinking, well, that doesn't look better at all. But the funny thing is, I feel like it is 100 times better than anything I have painted before. I look at it and I'm proud of it. Maybe that's just because I put more time into it than I've put into anything else that I've painted. But I also feel like I learned a ton, you know, and it went from being a cartoon character to a grungy mercenary that's going to attack the crew on my Chimera spaceship, you know, and you can't put a price on that. As cheesy as that sounds. I had more fun painting this than I've had painting anything else, because I wasn't just trying to get paint on something so I could throw it on the table. I was trying to paint something that I could be proud of. And I screwed up a ton. And in the end, there was a lot of things that I hope to do better next time. But I know what they are. And I made the mistakes on this one. And because of that, I know that the next one I paint will be better. And I'll keep painting.
Never give up, never surrender.
You know, when I originally picked Ninjon as the person that I wanted to follow, I thought this will be great because he's so good at breaking things down. And he is. You know, but I was hoping that there would be one video that was like, do this, do this, do this, do this. And it would just tell me how to be better. But the truth is that I have to practice. And watching all of the videos that I did gave me 100 extra things to look for as I do my own work. And it made a huge difference. So when it comes down to the question of, does watching a YouTuber help you get better? Well, it depends on how much you're willing to put into it. Watching Ninjon made me better. Made me not only feel better, but made the thing that I painted look better, because I had followed the advice that he gave. And one of the things that I love the most about this community is that there's people out there like Ninjon and Squidmar. You know, Squidmar posted a video not too long ago that spoke about how he tried to mimic the art style of somebody else until he found his own. And I feel like that's kind of what we all have to do, is we have to find somebody to mimic for a little bit until we find our own. But I can happily say that I'm on the path now to finding my own, which I couldn't say before. So I'm thankful for that. And I hope that you take this to heart. I hope you go and you look at your YouTuber, your content creator that you like the most, and instead of just watching their videos, you go back and you take some notes on their videos. And then you follow those notes and you try them and you get better. I would love to see that. I would love to see how much better you get. And I'll keep posting pictures about how much better I get. And hopefully one day I'll be up there. I'll be able to compete in Golden Demon tournaments and compete in art shows. And hopefully you will be too, if that's what you want to do. In the meantime, if anybody knows of some good brushes, I'd love to hear about it. If you have things that you think are better than others, paints, brushes, wet palettes, whatever it may be, let me know, because I'm looking to get better. And if you think it can help you, well, hopefully it can help me too. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. And as always, here at Pulsegate Games, we are looking forward to helping your tabletop become a little better, a little brighter, and always more fun. Please like, please subscribe, give this channel the chance that it needs to grow. And as always, don't spend so much time creating your world that you forget to spend some time in it. Until next time.